The envelope lay there, a seemingly innocuous piece of mail that held within it the power to upend an entire lifetime. John sat at the kitchen table, his hands resting on either side of the manila envelope with a grip that was more for his own steadying than for the hold of the paper. Angela, his wife, stood at his side, her face a canvas painted with trepidation, curiosity, and fear. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Angela's voice trembled slightly as she looked at her husband. John nodded, more to convince himself than her, as he gingerly opened the flap. The contents, DNA results, were the culprits threatening to unravel everything he thought he knew about himself, his family, and the world he'd meticulously crafted. "It's just a formality," John had told himself when he initially decided to take the test. But a part of him, a part he didn't want to acknowledge, hoped it would help him understand why he always felt slightly out of sync, like a note just barely out of tune. Now, as he scanned the results, his heart stopped. The world paused, and all that existed was the stark, clinical print of the genetic truth staring him straight in the eyes. No match. Those were the words that shattered his reality, cleaving through the facade of family like a scalpel cut through flesh. John pushed his chair back suddenly, causing it to scrape against the tiled floor. Angela reached for him, her own breath caught in a net of shock and disbelief. "John, what does it say?" Her question hung in the air, heavy and oppressive. I'm not related to them," John stammered, his eyes widening with a mix of horror and confusion. "This can't be right. It has to be a mistake." John stormed through the house, each framed family photograph now a mocking testament to the lie. The faces that once exuded warmth and belonging seemed now to leer at him with a secret they had harbored for decades. "I need to make a call," he croaked, leaving Angela in the kitchen as he stumbled into the hallway, his heart galloping as he reached for his phone. The call to his sister was brief and brimming with tension. She, too, was caught in the whirlpool of confusion, and as John's voice quivered over the line, he heard her assurances morph into paranoia. "There must be a mistake, John," she insisted. "Maybe the tests got mixed up. You have to talk to Mom and Dad." The phone call ended, leaving John in silence once more, a solitude thick with dread. Angela joined him in the living room, her eyes reflecting his own turmoil. "We need to find out the truth," she said, her voice firm with determination. John nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon beyond the window, where the sky anointed a new day with the light of an awakening sun. He knew what he had to do, and the resolve in his heart solidified with each passing second. Later that night, with the house cloaked in quietude, John drove. The road stretched before him, a daunting path he must traverse alone. In the silence of the car, John's mind erupted with memories, each now stained with the uncertainty of their origin. He arrived at his parents' home under a sky pregnant with stars, their twinkle seeming more mocking than magical. John's footsteps felt hollow on the porch as he approached the door, his heart hammering a discordant tune within his chest. As the first rays of morning gently unfolded over the neighborhood, John stood resolutely in front of the house where the answers, painful as they might be, awaited him. With a deep breath and a pounding heart, he prepared to confront the foundation of his family's lies, to demand the truth that had been so skillfully concealed. To be continued. John stood at the door, his knuckles hovered inches away, steadying his breath before finally knocking. Each rap seemed to echo louder in his mind than it did in reality. Seconds stretched into an eternity before the familiar sound of footsteps approached, and the door creaked open to reveal his mother, her face breaking into a smile that quickly faltered as she saw the expression on his face. "John, what's wrong?" she asked, genuine concern lacing her voice. "Mom, we need to talk." His voice was low, heavy with anticipation and fear of what was to come. She stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter, and they made their way to the cozy living room filled with trinkets from his childhood, souvenirs of a life now suspect. John's father joined them soon after, settling into his favorite armchair, its fabric worn from years of familial discourse. "What's this about, son?" his father asked, leaning forward, his fingers interlocked, an expression of innocent curiosity on his face. John took a deep breath, reaching for the envelope that had become as much a part of him as the air he breathed since receiving it. I got these DNA results back. They say I'm not biologically related to either of you. The room fell silent, the clock on the mantel ticking ominously in the background. His parents exchanged a glance, one loaded with layers of unspoken communication, before his mother took a deep breath. "John," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "There's something we never told you." His heart dropped. He'd been hoping, somewhere in the back of his mind, that this was all a misunderstanding, easily discarded. But now, as his mother prepared to speak, he realized this was only the beginning. "When you were born," she continued, her eyes glistening with unshed tears, "there were complications. You weren't the baby we brought home. There was a switch at the hospital, but by the time we found out, you were a part of us. We didn't know how to tell you, so we didn't." John felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath him. "You switched me with another baby?" His father interjected, his voice a soothing balm to his wife's distress. "We loved you from the moment we held you, John. You were ours in every way that mattered. But my whole life is a lie." John retorted, his voice rising with a mix of anger and a deep, aching sadness. "Who am I then? And what about the other child? We tried to find them, your biological parents, but it was a closed case by the time we knew. We didn't have the means, or the knowledge, to pursue it," his mother admitted, her hands wringing in her lap. John stood up abruptly, pacing the room as though movement might help him process the magnitude of what he had just learned. "All those years, did you never think I should know? We were afraid, son. Afraid of losing you, afraid of what it would do to us all. We wanted to protect you," his father said, his voice breaking slightly. John's mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions, betrayal, confusion, and beneath it all, a poignant sense of loss. Not only for himself but for the life he never knew existed. "I need some air," he muttered, heading for the door, the room too stifling with the weight of revelations and regrets. Outside, the crisp morning air hit him like a wake-up call, sharp and invigorating. He wandered into the small garden, his sanctuary during his childhood, seeking solace in its familiar embrace. Everywhere he looked, memories invaded, of his father teaching him to ride a bike, of his mother patching scraped knees. Despite everything, a part of him still yearned for the safety these memories offered. Yet they now felt tainted, shadows cast over them by the newfound truth. His phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting his thoughts. Angela. Her name was a lifeline amidst the chaos, and he answered her call, needing her voice more than anything else in that moment. "John." Her voice came through, soft but filled with concern. "Hey," he replied, the simple word loaded with complexities he found himself unable to express. "Did you talk to them?" she asked, hesitantly, as if fearing the answer. "Yeah," he replied. I'm not their son. Not really." "Oh, John, I'm so sorry," she responded, the anguish in her voice like a balm to his raw feelings. "They switched me at birth, Angie. There's another family out there. I don't know where or who they are, but they exist." Angela was silent for a moment, absorbing the information. "We'll find them," she finally said, her voice filled with determination. "Whatever it takes, we'll find them." He didn't respond immediately, his mind still grappling with the enormity of the task. But Angela's unwavering support was a comfort, a reminder that he wasn't alone in this. "I'll come home," he said at last, realizing that he needed to regroup, to face this new reality with Angela by his side. They hung up, and John stared at the sky, letting the vastness calm him, even as questions surged through him like a torrent. Who was he really? And why had fate woven such a tangled web for him? Returning inside, he found his parents still seated, united in their shared guilt and love. He sat down, meeting their eyes, and despite the anger and pain, there was still something undeniably familial in their bond. "I need some time," he said, his voice steadier now, though still laden with emotion. "I need to figure out who I am. His mother nodded, tears spilling over as she whispered, "We love you, John. No matter what, you've always been our son." John felt a flicker of warmth at her words, a tiny light in the midst of the emotional storm. He rose to leave, pausing to hug them both. It was an effort to bridge the divide the truth had created, but he needed that connection, however fragile it may be now. As he drove away, his mind churned with possibilities and paths yet to be taken. He thought of Angela, of their love, and of the unknown family that might be out there, waiting to be discovered. It was a journey he would soon undertake, a journey toward uncovering the hidden stories of his life, to find where he truly belonged. But for now, the road stretched on, and he let it carry him forward into the uncertain future. John drove in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound filling the vacuum created by the whirlwind of emotions in his heart. Each mile further from his parents' house felt like venturing into another realm, where the past no longer held the power to define his future. Yet, the gravity of the revelation clung to him like a second skin, an ever-present reminder of the identity he must now reconstruct. As he parked in the driveway of his own home, the sight of Angela standing by the window, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of the house, brought a measure of calm to his chaotic thoughts. She opened the door before he even reached the steps, enveloping him in a hug that communicated 1,000 unspoken words of support and solidarity. They settled on the sofa, the comfort of their shared space grounding John momentarily. Angela held his hand, her gaze unwavering and steady, urging him to speak when he was ready. "I don't even know where to start," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's like everything I thought I knew about myself is a lie." Angela nodded, squeezing his hand. "I can't imagine how that feels, John. But I'm here. Whatever you decide to do next, I'm with you. I need to find them, Angie. My real family, I mean. I need to know who I am," he said, his eyes betraying the vulnerability he felt. "We'll figure it out together," she assured him. "Maybe start with the hospital records. See if there's anything there about the switch." John considered it. It was a logical step, one he'd have to take if he wanted to unearth his origins. Yet the thought of diving into the bureaucracy, chasing leads that might not even exist, felt daunting. "Yeah, I guess that's where I'll start," he replied, uncertainty coating his words. "I just wish there was an easier way to find them." The next few days blurred into a montage of phone calls and paperwork. John contacted the hospital, hoping for records from over 4 decades ago, a quest that proved more arduous than he'd anticipated. Privacy laws, lost files, and the passage of time had woven a web of complexity around his search. Still, determination burned within him, fueled by the need to fill the void of missing identity. In moments of frustration, Angela was his anchor, reminding him of the progress they made, however small. Late into the night, they would sit together, combing through online forums and ancestry websites, clutching at any possibility that might lead them closer to the answer. One evening, while scrolling through an ancestry site, Angela paused, her eyes catching on a user post about a similar hospital mix-up. "John, look at this," she said, drawing his attention to the screen. It was a thread from someone searching for their lost sibling, born around the same year, in the same city as John. His heart quickened, curiosity piqued by the parallel. Could it be? Was this an echo of his own story playing out in someone else's life? They read the post together, poring over the details, each line resonating deeply with the threads of John's own past. "I have to reach out," John decided, his voice tinged with hope and apprehension. Angela nodded in agreement, encouraging him with her silent support. The message he drafted was simple yet loaded with emotion. He described his own dilemma succinctly, careful not to overwhelm, but eager to convey the urgency of his search. Hitting send, he felt a mix of relief and anxiety. The prospect of uncovering truth danced tantalizingly before him, while anxiety roiled just beneath the surface. Days passed, each one stretching painfully as he awaited a response. Meanwhile, life continued its relentless pace, the demands of work, social obligations, none of which seemed to hold meaning compared to the grand mystery occupying his thoughts. Then, one morning, it happened. An email arrived, the notifications chime a clarion call heralding potential revelation. John's fingers trembled as he clicked open the message, Angela watching with bated breath by his side. "Hi John," the reply began, the words appearing almost surreal. "I read your message. I think we might be connected. My parents always spoke of a mix-up at the hospital, and it sounds eerily like what you described." A gasp escaped Angela's lips as John continued to read, his mind a flurry of anticipation. The email continued with more details, a different name, similar age, matching timelines. A proposal for a video call, to discuss in more depth, brought both relief and trepidation. This could be it, John murmured, hardly daring to believe that after so much searching, hope was within grasp. Angela hugged him, her excitement mirrored in the quickened beat of his heart. The scheduled call became a focal point for John, each hour ticking by laced with both excitement and dread. When the appointed time arrived, he found himself nervously adjusting the camera, Angela beside him, both bracing for what lay ahead. The screen flickered to life, displaying a woman who looked to be in her mid-40s, her features reflecting an uncanny resemblance to John's. The sight was jarring, familiarity breaking through the barriers of disbelief. "John?" she asked, her voice tentative yet filled with hope. "Yes, and you must be," he left the sentence hanging, inviting her to fill in the blanks. "I'm Susan," she introduced herself, her eyes scanning his face as though finding echoes of herself in his features. Over the next hour, they shared their stories, piecing together fragments of their histories that aligned with startling accuracy. Neither had definitive proof, but the bond they felt, the shared quest for truth, was undeniable. "We've searched for so long," Susan admitted, her voice tinged with emotion. "My parents always hoped to find you. I can't believe this is happening." "I can't either," John agreed, a strange blend of joy and sorrow swirling within him. "But I'm glad we found each other." They spoke of next steps, DNA tests to confirm, plans to meet, the world suddenly feeling smaller and infinitely more complex. As they signed off, John felt a sense of peace mingling with anticipation for what was to come. Later that night, he and Angela lay awake, the possibilities spinning out into the darkness. For the first time in weeks, John felt a sense of belonging beginning to root itself once more, nurtured by the connection he'd found. Yet questions remained, paths uncharted and truths awaiting discovery. The journey was far from over, each step drawing him closer to the resolution he craved, and the family he never knew he had. But for now, in the silence of the night, he allowed himself a moment of peace, buoyed by the knowledge that he was not alone. The road ahead was long, but he would not walk it unguided. In the days that followed, John and Susan continued to communicate, their conversations a lifeline as they navigated the uncharted waters of their shared history. Their DNA test results were slow to arrive, each day of waiting filled with a mix of hope and anxiety, but both felt the deep-rooted connection that had formed despite the lack of scientific confirmation. Finally, the email arrived. John hesitated momentarily before opening it, his hand shaking on the mouse. Angela, sitting beside him, squeezed his arm reassuringly. They read the results together, the words on the screen altering the course of their lives, an undeniable match. It was true, John and Susan were siblings, linked by blood despite the decades that had kept them apart. The joy was overwhelming, a validation of the bond they had felt from their first conversation. John felt a surreal lightness, as if a part of himself that had been missing had finally clicked into place. There was a clarity that came with this knowledge, an understanding deeply profound. Plans were quickly set into motion for a meeting. Susan and her family lived a state away, and the drive seemed both daunting and thrilling. John imagined what it would be like to meet not only his sister but a whole array of family members he had never dreamed existed. On the morning of the trip, John stood in front of the mirror, straightening his tie, a habit formed through years of business meetings that now took on a new significance. Angela appeared behind him, wrapping her arms around his waist, her eyes filled with pride and encouragement. "Are you ready?" she asked, her voice warm and supportive. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, turning to face her, grateful for every step they had taken together. The drive was filled with nervous excitement, the road signs ticking down the miles to a future that was finally falling into place. As they neared Susan's house, John's heart raced, a mixture of anticipation and the weight of expectation. They arrived at a quaint suburban neighborhood, the houses lined with trees in bloom. Each step toward Susan's front door felt momentous, every breath a preparation for the moment of truth. Susan opened the door with a wide smile, tears in her eyes reflective of the emotional storm in John's heart. "John," she exclaimed, pulling him into an embrace that spoke volumes more than words ever could. It was a homecoming of sorts, and as he stepped inside, faces lit with curiosity and warmth greeted him. Susan introduced him to each family member, her husband, her 2 children, and their parents, his parents, he reminded himself. They were older now, lines etched into their faces by time and perhaps by the unfulfilled search for him. Despite the nervousness, John found himself immediately embraced by warmth and acceptance. They spent the afternoon sharing stories, laughter mingling with tears as they began to weave together the fabric of a shared future. At one point, Susan's mother, a petite woman with kind eyes, took John's hand, her voice soft and sincere. "We've always wished for this day. To finally meet you, after all these years, feels like the closing of a chapter and the start of a new one." John nodded, emotion choking his response. "I've wanted the same. It's surreal but incredible." He realized that while he was gaining a new family, he wasn't losing the one he grew up with. Instead, his world had expanded, embracing both past and present, knitting together all aspects of his life. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the gathering, John found himself talking to Susan's father. There was an openness to him, a strength that mirrored John's own, and their conversation flowed easily. "I always hoped we'd find you," he confessed, his voice thick with emotion. "We tried so hard when it happened. It's a miracle to see you here now." "I'm glad you never stopped looking," John replied, meaning every word. The day unfolded with a sense of belonging and newfound joy. John felt lighter, more complete, as if the missing pieces of his life story had fallen into place. By the time he and Angela departed, the air had shifted, filled with promises to visit soon, holidays to be spent together, and the shared certainty that they had all gained something immeasurable that day. On the drive home, the world felt different to John. It was as if he had found his true north, a guiding light in the form of faces he now knew to be his. He and Angela talked about the future, the plans to integrate both families, and the excitement of the possibilities that lay ahead. As they pulled into their driveway, John paused, looking at the house that was a symbol of stability and love in his life. He turned to Angela, gratitude and love overwhelming him. "I couldn't have done any of this without you," he said sincerely, reaching for her hand. "We did it together," she corrected, smiling. "And I'm so glad you found what you've been searching for." Later that night, as they lay in bed, John reflected on his journey. He had gone from uncertainty and doubt about who he was and where he came from to a place of understanding and fulfillment. Though there had been moments of pain and confusion, he realized that everything had led him to this point, a place of peace where he could embrace both his past and future. He drifted into sleep with a contented heart, enveloped by the love of the family he was born into and the family he had never known. The weight of the unanswered questions that had haunted him for so long had lifted, replaced with the warmth of belonging, and the knowledge that he was, as he had always been, loved.